Terrence Washington, the self-made billionaire CEO of Phoenix Technologies, stood frozen in the middle of the first-class cabin. Shocked crew members and passengers stared at him, mouths agape. His final words hung in the air like a thunderclap: "You're all fired. Every single one of you." The stunned silence that followed was deafening. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about people standing up against discrimination. How would you react if you were in Terrence's position? Let's find out what led to this dramatic moment. Terrence Washington wasn't born into privilege or wealth. Quite the opposite. Growing up in South Chicago's roughest neighborhood, he was the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Their apartment was small, often cold in winter, and the sounds of sirens were their nightly lullaby. But Darlene Washington had instilled in her son an unshakable belief: education was his ticket out. "My mother used to tell me, Terrence, they can take everything from you, but they can never take what's in here," Terrence often recounted in interviews, tapping his temple. She'd say, "Your mind is your greatest asset." And what an asset it was. From an early age, Terrence displayed exceptional intelligence, particularly with mathematics and computers. While other kids played basketball in the neighborhood courts, young Terrence was taking apart and reassembling old computers he'd salvaged from dumpsters. By 13, he'd taught himself 3 programming languages. His academic prowess didn't go unnoticed. Despite attending an underfunded public school, his standardized test scores were off the charts. His high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, fought tirelessly to get college recruiters to look beyond his zip code. "She was the first person outside my mother who truly believed in me," Terrence would later say. "When MIT offered me a full scholarship, Mrs. Patterson cried harder than my mom." The transition from South Chicago to Cambridge wasn't easy. Terrence experienced culture shock and isolation. Many of his classmates came from wealth and privilege, and some made it clear they thought he didn't belong. "I remember this one professor who would always question if I had actually done my own work," Terrence recalled in his autobiography From Zero to Phoenix. "My solutions were too elegant for someone with my background," he'd say. "That's when I realized excellence would always have to be my answer to prejudice." And excel he did. Terrence graduated at the top of his class with dual degrees in computer science and business administration. But unlike many of his peers who headed straight to established tech giants, Terrence had other plans. With just $500 saved from his campus job, he returned to Chicago and set up shop in his mother's garage. Phoenix Technologies was born, named after the mythical bird that rises from ashes, just as Terrence intended to rise from his humble beginnings. The early years were lean. Terrence survived on ramen noodles and determination. His first product was a cybersecurity software that he developed during his senior year project. When major companies showed interest but hesitated to buy from a one-man operation run out of a garage, Terrence didn't give up. Instead, he refined his pitch and targeted smaller businesses who couldn't afford the expensive security solutions offered by industry giants. Word spread about the affordable yet highly effective security software from Phoenix Technologies. By year 3, Terrence had moved out of the garage and into a proper office space. By year 5, Phoenix had 50 employees. Year 10 saw the company go public with Terrence retaining majority control, making him the youngest black billionaire in American history at 32. Throughout Phoenix's meteoric rise, Terrence maintained a philosophy of fairness and respect. The company culture he built was legendary in the tech industry, merit-based, inclusive, with industry-leading diversity initiatives long before they became corporate buzzwords. "I built this company knowing what it feels like to be underestimated and overlooked," he often told new employees during orientation. "At Phoenix, the only color that matters is the color of your ideas." His executive team reflected this commitment. Alana Brooks, a brilliant Harvard MBA graduate who'd been passed over for promotions at her previous companies, thrived as Phoenix's COO. Jordan Williams, a former FBI cybersecurity expert, headed the security division. The C-suite at Phoenix looked nothing like the homogeneous leadership teams typical in Silicon Valley. Despite his immense wealth, Terrence maintained certain principles. He refused to buy a private jet, instead flying commercial with his employees. "The day I stop experiencing the world like regular people is the day I lose touch with our customers," was his explanation. This wasn't just talk. Phoenix Technologies' customer satisfaction ratings were among the highest in the industry. Terrence insisted on personally reviewing customer feedback each month, a practice unheard of for CEOs of his stature. This particular Thursday morning had begun on a high note. Phoenix had just secured a massive government contract worth $4.2 billion to overhaul federal cybersecurity infrastructure, the largest contract in the company's history. The team needed to fly to New York immediately for the final signing ceremony scheduled for the following morning. "This is a game changer," Alana had said during their emergency executive meeting. "This contract doesn't just transform Phoenix, it sends a message to the entire industry about who we are." Terrence had nodded, allowing himself a rare moment of pride. "Then let's get to New York and make it official." None of them could have predicted what would happen on that flight, or how it would indeed send a message to the entire industry, though not in the way they had anticipated. The atmosphere at O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the usual Thursday afternoon chaos. Business travelers clutched briefcases and rolled carry-ons with determined efficiency, while tourists moved in confused clusters, consulting their phones for gate information. Terrence Washington and his executive team from Phoenix Technologies made their way to Gate B-23, where SkyWest Airlines Flight 1442 to New York's LaGuardia Airport was preparing to board. Despite the momentous $4.2 billion contract awaiting their signatures, the Phoenix team maintained a low profile. First class and priority passengers for SkyWest Flight 1442 to New York LaGuardia may now begin boarding, came the announcement over the PA system. Terrence, dressed in an impeccably tailored Navy Tom Ford suit, approached the gate with his boarding pass displayed on his phone. The gate agent, a young woman named Heather, glanced at his boarding pass and then at his face, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Oh, Mr. Washington. It's an honor to have you flying with us today. Congratulations on the government contract announcement, it was just on the news." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. Terrence offered a polite smile. "Thank you. That's very kind." As he moved past the gate and into the jet bridge, Terrence noticed the subtle shift in how people regarded him once they realized who he was. Some displayed genuine respect, while others showed that all too familiar look of surprise. The unspoken, "I didn't expect someone like you to be in first class," look that he'd encountered throughout his career. Approaching the aircraft door, he was greeted by Shannon Miller, a flight attendant with bleached blonde hair pulled into a tight bun and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard," she said, barely making eye contact before turning to the passenger behind him with a warmer greeting. Terrence made his way to seat 2A, a window seat in first class that he'd specifically reserved. He preferred window seats on flights, they allowed him the privacy to work without interruption and the view helped him think. He stowed his leather briefcase under the seat in front of him and settled in. His team filed in shortly after. Due to the last-minute nature of their booking, they hadn't been able to secure seats together. Alana Brooks, his COO, was seated in 4C. Jordan Williams had 6D. The rest of his executive team was scattered throughout first class and premium economy. Flight attendant Shannon Miller moved through the cabin, offering pre-departure beverages to first-class passengers, her service noticeably warmer to the white passengers. When she reached Terrence, her demeanor was cool and efficient. "Water?" she asked, not offering the champagne or orange juice she presented to others. "Orange juice would be fine, thank you," Terrence replied evenly. She returned moments later with a plastic cup of orange juice, setting it down without a word before moving on to the next passenger with a suddenly brightened, "And what can I get for you today, sir?" Terrence took a small sip, observing the interaction without comment. These subtle differences in treatment weren't new to him. Throughout his career, he'd learned to identify the difference between someone having a bad day and someone displaying bias. This was clearly the latter, but he had a contract to focus on, not a flight attendant's behavior. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Good afternoon, folks. This is Captain Bradley Thompson. On behalf of SkyWest Airlines, I'd like to welcome you aboard Flight 1442 to New York LaGuardia. Our flight time today will be approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. We're expecting a smooth ride, but we'll keep the seatbelt sign on until we're sure. As boarding continued, Terence pulled out his phone to review some last-minute details about the contract. He was deep in conversation with his legal team when a commotion at the front of the cabin caught his attention. "I don't care what the computer says. That's my seat. It always has been." The loud, entitled voice belonged to an older white man in an expensive but somewhat rumpled suit. Walter Sterling, as Terence would later learn, was a real estate magnate known for developing luxury properties and his connections to political power players. Shannon Miller was nodding deferentially. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Let me see what I can do." Sterling stood impatiently in the aisle, his presence causing a backlog of boarding passengers. He caught Terence looking at him and narrowed his eyes slightly before turning back to the flight attendant. "I need 2A. I've had that seat on this flight every Thursday for the past 6 years. Your airline knows this." Terence felt a prickle of unease. 2A, his seat. The seat he had specifically booked and checked in for 24 hours in advance. He returned to his phone call, keeping one ear on the developing situation. "Yes, Layla, the language in Section 7B looks good, but I'm concerned about the timeline commitments in Appendix C." He continued, attempting to focus on the contract details. The boarding process continued around this disturbance, with the rest of the Phoenix team finding their assigned seats. Alana caught Terence's eye from her seat a few rows back, raising a questioning eyebrow at Sterling's ongoing complaint. Terence gave a subtle shake of his head, no need for concern yet. As the final passengers boarded, Captain Thompson emerged from the cockpit, his tall frame filling the front galley area. He conversed quietly with Shannon, both occasionally glancing in Terence's direction. The captain's expression was stern, his posture rigid in his crisp uniform with 4 stripes on the epaulets. Terence ended his call and tucked his phone into his jacket pocket, an unconscious straightening of his shoulders the only sign that he was preparing for what might come. Years of navigating predominantly white corporate spaces had given him a sixth sense for when trouble was brewing, and all his instincts were now on high alert. The cabin door closed with a heavy thunk, sealing them all inside the metal tube. The final preparations for departure began, but Walter Sterling remained standing in the aisle, his eyes now fixed directly on Terence's seat. Shannon Miller approached, her lips pressed into a thin line, Captain Thompson hovering just behind her at the edge of the galley. The confrontation Terence had sensed was coming was now imminent. Shannon Miller stopped beside Terence's seat, her customer service smile firmly in place but not reaching her eyes. Behind her, Captain Thompson maintained what he probably thought was a discreet presence, though his authority was clearly meant to be felt. "Excuse me, sir," Shannon began, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby passengers. "We have a slight seating issue." Terence looked up from his phone, his expression neutral but attentive. "How can I help?" Shannon gestured toward Walter Sterling, who stood in the aisle with arms crossed. "Mr. Sterling is one of our most valued Platinum Elite members. He always sits in 2A on this route. There seems to have been a mix-up with our booking system." Terence raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe there's been any mix-up. I booked this seat specifically and checked in yesterday." He pulled up his boarding pass on his phone, displaying it to her. "As you can see, I'm assigned to 2A." Shannon barely glanced at the confirmation. "Yes, well, sometimes our system makes errors. Mr. Sterling has held this seat for years, and we'd like to accommodate him. There's an available middle seat in row 17 that we can move you to." The implication was clear, move from first class to economy, from a window seat to a middle seat. All to accommodate the preference, not even a booking, of a white passenger. "I'm afraid that won't work for me," Terence replied calmly. "I've paid for this specific seat, and I need to work during this flight. I have important meetings in New York." Walter Sterling stepped closer, his cologne heavy in the recycled cabin air. "Look, buddy, this is my seat. Always has been. I'm sure whatever you're working on can wait for a couple of hours." Terence didn't acknowledge Sterling directly, maintaining eye contact with Shannon instead. "I understand you're in a difficult position, but I've done nothing wrong here. I booked this seat properly and arrived on time. There's no legitimate reason for me to move. Several nearby passengers were now openly watching the interaction. From a few rows back, Alana Brooks had unbuckled her seatbelt, clearly preparing to intervene if necessary. Shannon's pleasant facade slipped slightly. "Sir, we can make this easy or difficult. It's just a seat. Is it really worth making a scene?" "I'm not making a scene," Terence replied evenly. "I'm simply occupying the seat I paid for. If Mr. Sterling doesn't have an assigned seat, perhaps you could find him another available spot in first class." Captain Thompson chose this moment to step forward. "Is there a problem here?" His tone suggested that he already believed there was, and that Terence was the source. "No problem at all, Captain," Terence said. "I'm just explaining that I've booked this seat and plan to stay in it." The first officer, Brian Reynolds, had now joined the growing audience, standing just behind Captain Thompson. His expression was a mix of curiosity and judgment. "Sir," Captain Thompson said, the word somehow sounding like an insult, "on this aircraft, our flight crew has final authority over seating arrangements. Ms. Miller has requested that you move to accommodate a long-standing passenger." Terence noticed the careful language, not a higher-tier passenger or passenger with the correct booking, but a long-standing passenger. Code for white and wealthy. "Captain, with all due respect, airline policy and FAA regulations allow you to reassign seats for safety or operational reasons. This is neither. This appears to be preferential treatment based on criteria that have nothing to do with safety or operations." Thompson's face darkened slightly. "Sir, are you telling me how to do my job?" "Not at all," Terence replied. "I'm simply stating facts about passenger rights. If there's a legitimate reason I need to change seats, I'll comply immediately." Walter Sterling scoffed. "The reason is I always sit there. Everyone knows that. Who do you think you are?" Shannon leaned in, lowering her voice to a whisper that nearby passengers could still hear. "Sir, we can make the rest of this flight very comfortable or very uncomfortable for you. It's your choice." The threat was barely veiled. Terence felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the burden of being a black man in America, constantly faced with the choice between standing his ground and risking escalation or conceding to avoid potentially dangerous confrontation. Alana had now made her way up the aisle. "Is everything okay, Terence?" Before he could answer, Brian Reynolds stepped forward. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. The seatbelt sign is on." "The sign just turned on 30 seconds ago," Alana pointed out, "and I'm concerned about what appears to be discriminatory treatment of my colleague." Shannon's eyes widened at the accusation. "This has nothing to do with that. This is about accommodating a loyal customer." "A loyal customer without an assigned seat in this location," Terence noted, his voice still calm despite the rising tension. "May I see Mr. Sterling's boarding pass?" Walter Sterling's face flushed with anger. "I don't need to show you anything. These people know who I am." "These people?" Alana repeated, her eyebrow raised. Captain Thompson raised his hand in a stopping gesture. "That's enough. Sir," he addressed Terence directly, "you need to move to the seat Ms. Miller has offered, or I'll be forced to remove you from this aircraft." The cabin had grown uncomfortably quiet, with most passengers now openly watching the confrontation. Some looked embarrassed by the crew's behavior, while others seemed to be enjoying the spectacle of a well-dressed black man being put in his place. Terence took a deep breath, weighing his options. He knew his rights as a passenger, but he also knew the reality of being a black man perceived as difficult or threatening on an airplane. The potential consequences ranged from merely missing his important meeting to a much more dangerous situation if law enforcement became involved. "May I at least see written confirmation that this seat belongs to Mr. Sterling?" Terence asked, making one final attempt at reasonable discourse. "You people always want everything in writing," Walter muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Shannon ignored the request entirely. "Sir, this is your final warning. Move to seat 17B, or we'll have you removed from the flight." The thinly veiled racism in the interaction was becoming impossible to ignore. Terrence glanced at Alana, whose expression conveyed a clear message: this isn't worth the risk. He was a black man being confronted by airline staff, and law enforcement might be next. No matter his wealth or status, in this moment, he was just another black body that could be deemed threatening, with potentially deadly consequences. The calculation was simple but bitter: his dignity against his safety. Captain Thompson stood towering over Terrence, his shadow casting a symbolic darkness over the situation. "Sir, this is the final call. Either you move to the seat assigned by my crew, or I'll have security remove you from this aircraft." Terrence remained outwardly calm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Every eye in the first-class cabin was now fixed on him, some passengers recording discreetly with their phones, others pretending not to watch while catching every detail. "Captain," Terrence tried once more, "I've shown you my boarding pass confirming my assignment to this seat. Mr. Sterling has yet to produce any documentation showing his claim to 2A. I'm simply asking for verification before I'm displaced." Walter Sterling snorted derisively. "I don't need documentation. I've been sitting in this seat every Thursday for 6 years. These people know me." He gestured dismissively toward the crew. "These people?" Terrence repeated quietly, raising an eyebrow. Captain Thompson's jaw tightened. "That's enough. I've made my decision." He raised his hand and motioned toward the front of the plane. Two men in plain clothes whom Terrence immediately recognized as air marshals approached from their seats. The situation had escalated far beyond what was reasonable for a seating dispute. Terrence felt the familiar cold dread that many black Americans experience when confronted by authority figures, regardless of their socio-economic status. This was no longer about a seat, it was about his safety. "Is this really necessary?" Alana interjected, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're calling federal agents over a seating assignment?" Shannon Miller turned to her with a tight smile. "Ma'am, please return to your seat immediately or you'll be removed as well." The air marshals reached Terrence's row. One stood in the aisle while the other positioned himself in the galley, effectively blocking any exit route. "Sir," the first marshal said, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon, "we need you to comply with the flight crew's instructions." Terrence looked from the marshal to Captain Thompson to Shannon Miller, whose expression held the faintest hint of satisfaction. He then glanced at Walter Sterling, who was now smirking openly, his arms crossed over his chest in triumph. The message was clear: know your place. In that moment, Terrence made his decision. With deliberate movements, he gathered his briefcase and stood up, his 6'2" frame commanding presence despite the humiliation being inflicted upon him. Under protest, he said clearly, ensuring his voice carried throughout the cabin, "I will move to avoid further escalation of this situation. But let the record show that I have a confirmed reservation for this seat, and I am being moved without cause or proper documentation." The air marshal stepped back, allowing Terrence to exit the row. Walter Sterling immediately slid into the vacated window seat, making a show of settling in and arranging his belongings as if reclaiming rightful property. "That's more like it," Sterling muttered. "Some people need to learn their place." The comment was just loud enough for Terrence and nearby passengers to hear, but not so loud that the crew would be forced to address it. It was the calculated insult of someone accustomed to wielding privilege as a weapon. With dignity that belied the storm of emotions within him, Terrence followed Shannon toward the back of the plane. The walk felt interminable. First-class passengers watched with expressions ranging from discomfort to indifference to barely concealed satisfaction. As they passed through the premium economy section where some of his team sat, faces of shock and anger greeted him. Jordan Williams half rose from his seat, his expression thunderous, but Terrence gave a subtle shake of his head. "Not now." The economy section was already crowded, the narrow aisle made narrower by passengers still stowing bags and finding seats. Every step deeper into the plane was a step away from the space he had rightfully purchased, a physical manifestation of the metaphorical pushing aside that he and many others had experienced throughout their lives. Shannon finally stopped at row 17. 17B, middle seat. She gestured without making eye contact, already turning to leave. Terrence looked at the cramped middle seat, then down at his $5,000 suit, briefcase, and the work materials he'd planned to review during the flight. The passengers in 17A and 17C were already seated, a large man by the window who had spilled over into the middle seat space, and a woman on the aisle who seemed annoyed at the prospect of having to move. Have you ever been treated unfairly because of how you look? Comment 1 if you've experienced discrimination, and 2 if you believe this airline crew was wrong to move Terrence. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up against injustice. What would you have done in Terrence's place? Would you have given up your rightful seat or stood your ground knowing the risks? Let's see what happens next as Terrence makes a discovery that changes everything. Excuse me, Terrence said quietly to the woman in 17C, who sighed dramatically before standing to let him in. As he squeezed into the middle seat, his knees pressing against the seat in front, Terrence became acutely aware of the whispers and stares from surrounding passengers. The story of the well-dressed black man being removed from first class had traveled through the cabin faster than any in-flight Wi-Fi could have transmitted it. I can't believe they did that to you, whispered the teenage girl sitting behind him, leaning forward. I saw the whole thing on TikTok already. Someone in first class was streaming it. Terrence nodded acknowledgement but said nothing. His mind was already moving beyond the humiliation to what would come next. Because while Shannon, Captain Thompson, and Walter Sterling might have won this battle, they had inadvertently started a war they were ill-prepared to fight. The seatbelt sign dinged, and the plane began to pull away from the gate. In seat 17B, surrounded by strangers and the murmurs of sympathy and judgment, Terrence Washington sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. But behind his calm exterior, gears were turning. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 30,000 feet above the American heartland, Terrence Washington sat in uncomfortable silence. The large man in 17A had fallen asleep and was now snoring softly, his body heat adding to the discomfort of the cramped middle seat. The woman in 17C had put on headphones immediately after takeoff, making it clear she wasn't interested in conversation. The flight attendants had started their service, the beverage cart slowly making its way down the narrow aisle. Shannon Miller was working first class, naturally, while two other attendants handled the economy section. One of them, a young black woman whose name tag read Tiffany Carter, kept glancing at Terrence as she worked. When she finally reached row 17, she leaned down slightly as she asked, "What can I get for you, sir?" "Just water, please," Terrence replied. As she poured the water, Tiffany lowered her voice. "You're Terrence Washington, aren't you? CEO of Phoenix Technologies?" Terrence nodded, slightly surprised. "I am." Tiffany handed him the water with a napkin. Written on the napkin in small, neat handwriting were the words, "What they did was wrong. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Terrence said meaningfully, making eye contact to acknowledge both the water and the message. Tiffany hesitated, then moved on to the next row, continuing her service. Terrence sipped his water thoughtfully, tucking the napkin into his pocket. 20 minutes later, as the service concluded and the cabin settled into the rhythm of mid-flight monotony, Tiffany passed by again, this time dropping a folded piece of paper onto Terrence's tray table as she collected trash. When he was certain no one was watching, Terrence unfolded the note. "This isn't the first time. Thompson, Miller, and Reynolds have a history of reseating black passengers from first class, especially for Sterling and his friends. They call it maintaining the right environment. I've been documenting incidents but afraid to report. Company hasn't acted on previous complaints." Terrence read the note twice, then carefully tore it into tiny pieces and mixed them with the ice in his empty cup. His suspicions confirmed, he felt a cold clarity replace the simmering anger and humiliation. When Tiffany passed by again, he signaled her discreetly. She bent down, pretending to adjust something on his tray table. "Thank you for the information," Terrence said quietly. "Would you be willing to speak with me after the flight? I may be in a position to address this situation." Tiffany's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I finish at 8 p.m. There's a coffee shop near baggage claim." "I'll be there," Terrence promised. With new purpose, he pulled out his phone and activated the airplane mode-compliant text messaging service. He sent a message to Alana, research ownership structure of SkyWest parent company. Urgent. 5 minutes later, his phone pinged with her reply, Diversified Holdings Incorporated owns 67%. Why? Terrence smiled for the first time since boarding the flight. Who owns controlling interest in Diversified? The reply came quickly, Washington Capital Partners has 28% stake. Your investment firm. And there it was. The cosmic irony that Walter Sterling and the crew couldn't have anticipated. Through his investment firm, Terrence Washington effectively owned a significant portion of the very airline that had just discriminated against him. He sent another message to Alana, contact legal team. Need full briefing on our rights as shareholders. Also, get me everything on discrimination complaints against SkyWest in last 5 years. His next message went to Jordan, security protocols for capturing digital evidence without alerting subjects. Jordan's response was immediate and detailed, outlining how Terrence could use his phone to record conversations without being obvious about it. Armed with this knowledge, Terrence settled back into his uncomfortable seat with renewed patience. The remaining 3 hours of the flight no longer felt like an endurance test of humiliation, but rather the calm before a storm of his own making. When Tiffany passed by again, Terrence caught her attention. Ms. Carter, could I trouble you for another water? Of course, sir, she replied professionally. When she returned with the water, he asked softly, how long have Thompson, Miller, and Reynolds been working together? 5 years on this route, she whispered. They request the same schedules. They've got a nickname for first class. They call it, the White Section. Terrence managed to keep his expression neutral despite the shocking revelation. And Sterling? He's their favorite. Always gets what he wants. Sometimes they bump confirmed passengers for him and his friends even when there are open seats elsewhere in first class. Management knows. They don't care. Thank you, Terrence said sincerely. That's very helpful. For the remainder of the flight, Terrence used his phone to make notes, careful to appear as though he was simply working. He outlined a strategy, considered angles, and prepared for what would come next. In seat 2A, Walter Sterling enjoyed his complimentary champagne, completely unaware that the man he had helped humiliate was methodically assembling the pieces of what would become the most expensive lesson in consequences Sterling would ever receive. Somewhere over Pennsylvania, Terrence received another message from Alana. Legal team found 24 formal complaints against this specific crew in past 18 months. All from minority passengers. No action taken by airline. HR director is Sterling's brother-in-law. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about one incident on one flight. This was systemic, deliberate discrimination that had been allowed to fester unchecked. Until now. As the captain announced their initial descent into New York, Terrence Washington closed his eyes briefly, centering himself for what was to come. When he opened them again, his gaze was clear and focused. The billionaire CEO who had built an empire from nothing was about to remind everyone of an important lesson: power wasn't always visible, and consequences didn't always come immediately. But they always, eventually, came. The aircraft touched down at LaGuardia with a gentle bump, tires squealing against wet tarmac as rain pelted the windows. Captain Thompson's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional as if nothing untoward had occurred during the flight. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York's LaGuardia Airport. Local time is 6:42 p.m., and the temperature is 62 degrees with light rain. On behalf of SkyWest Airlines and our entire crew, I'd like to thank you for flying with us today. We know you have many choices when you fly, and we appreciate you choosing SkyWest. The irony of the standard script wasn't lost on Terrence. Choices. As if he'd been given any. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign and we've arrived at the gate. Flight attendants, prepare for arrival. The plane taxied slowly toward the terminal, joining the queue of aircraft waiting for their gates. Terrence used these final minutes to compose a series of text messages to his team, coordinating their movements once they deplaned. Jordan, stay back, observe crew, note interactions with Sterling. Alana, meet me at gate. Legal team still coming. Natalie, cancel dinner reservation. New plans forming. The responses came quickly, his team falling into formation even without knowing all the details. That was the benefit of building a company culture based on trust and mutual respect. When leadership needed support, it materialized without question. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the familiar chaos of deplaning began. Passengers stood in unison, retrieving bags from overhead bins, forming the awkward half-standing, half-sitting queue that characterized every flight's end. Ladies and gentlemen, one more reminder to please check around your seating area for any personal belongings you may have brought on board with you, Shannon Miller's voice announced cheerfully. Terrence remained seated, allowing the crowd to thin before attempting to extract himself from the middle seat. He had no desire to rush off the plane only to wait for his team, and more importantly, he wanted to observe the crew's behavior without them noticing his attention. From his vantage point, he could see first-class passengers deplaning. Walter Sterling took his time gathering his belongings, exchanging familiar banter with Shannon and the other flight attendants. Captain Thompson had emerged from the cockpit and stopped to chat with Sterling, their body language suggesting a friendly relationship beyond the professional courtesy extended to a frequent flyer. "Another smooth flight, Walt," Thompson said, just loud enough for Terrence to hear. "Sorry about the seat mix-up. Some people just don't understand how things work." Sterling laughed, adjusting his expensive watch. "No harm done. You handled it appropriately. These tech types need to learn there's a pecking order in the real world, regardless of how much new money they flash around." "Exactly," Thompson agreed. "Safe travels. See you next Thursday." As always, Sterling confirmed, giving Shannon a wink as he finally made his way toward the exit. Terrence captured the exchange on his phone, recording video that showed both men clearly. The evidence was mounting by the minute. When first class had emptied and most of premium economy had deplaned, Terrence finally stood and retrieved his briefcase from under the seat. He made his way forward slowly, observing how Shannon, Thompson, and Reynolds studiously avoided eye contact as he approached the exit. Only Tiffany Carter acknowledged him with a subtle nod as he passed. He returned the gesture, a silent confirmation of their planned meeting later. Just before stepping off the plane, Terrence paused and turned to Captain Thompson, who was chatting with the first officer near the cockpit door. "Captain," Terrence said pleasantly, extending his business card, "I believe we got off on the wrong foot earlier." Terrence Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies. Thompson's face registered first confusion, then shock as recognition dawned. He took the card automatically, staring at it as if it might bite him. "Mr. Washington, I didn't realize." Clearly, Terrence interrupted smoothly. "But now you do. Have a good evening, Captain. Ms. Miller, Mr. Reynolds." He nodded to each of them in turn, noting their stunned expressions with satisfaction. As he stepped into the jet bridge, he heard the frantic whispers erupting behind him. Let them panic, he thought. It was only the beginning. Alana was waiting at the gate, her expression a mixture of concern and controlled anger. "Terrence, I've been briefed by the team. This is unconscionable. We have options." "We certainly do," Terrence agreed as they walked briskly toward the terminal exit. More than they realize. They had just reached the main concourse when a breathless man in a SkyWest Airlines management uniform intercepted them, a woman in a similar uniform half jogging to keep up with him. "Mr. Washington. Mr. Washington, please, if I could have just a moment of your time." The man's face was flushed with exertion and anxiety. His name badge identified him as Gregory Phillips, station manager. Terrence stopped, his expression neutral. "Yes. Sir, I've just been informed about the unfortunate misunderstanding on your flight. On behalf of SkyWest Airlines, I want to extend our most sincere apologies." Phillips was practically vibrating with nervous energy. The woman beside him stepped forward. "Mr. Washington, I'm Vanessa Harding, Customer Relations Director for the Northeast region. We'd like to offer you compensation for your inconvenience and invite you to a private discussion about what occurred." Terrence regarded them both silently for a moment. Ms. Harding, Mr. Phillips, I appreciate your prompt attention to this matter. However, what occurred on Flight 1442 was not a misunderstanding. It was discrimination, plain and simple. Phillips winced. Sir, I assure you that SkyWest does not condone. Save it, Terrence cut him off, his voice calm but firm. I'm not interested in platitudes or damage control. What I experienced today was part of a pattern of behavior that your airline has knowingly tolerated. Vanessa Harding's professional smile faltered. Mr. Washington, perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private? We have a lounge. No thank you, Terrence declined. Any discussions will take place through official channels, with my legal team present. Good evening. He turned and continued walking, Alana matching his stride. Behind them, Phillips and Harding conferred urgently, clearly unsure how to handle a high-profile customer who wasn't interested in being quietly appeased. As they exited the terminal into the rainy New York evening, a line of town cars waited for passengers. Jordan and the rest of the Phoenix team had already secured transportation and were waiting. Hotel or straight to the emergency meeting? Alana asked as they approached the vehicles. Terrence checked his watch. Hotel first. I have a meeting at 8 p.m. with someone from the flight. Then we convene at 9:30 to plan our next steps. Jordan opened the car door for them, his expression serious. Sterling made a phone call as soon as he deplaned. Seemed agitated. I think word is spreading about who you are. Good, Terrence said, sliding into the back seat. Let them worry. By morning, they'll have much more to be concerned about than embarrassment. As the car pulled away from the curb, Terrence gazed out at the rainy Manhattan skyline coming into view. The $4.2 billion contract signing scheduled for tomorrow morning still mattered, of course. But now he had another mission, equally important, ensuring that what had happened to him today never happened to anyone else on SkyWest Airlines again. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Mr. Washington, this is Tiffany Carter. I'm not the only crew member with documentation. 2 others want to meet tonight as well. They have videos. Terrence showed the message to Alana, whose eyes widened. This is bigger than we thought, she said. It usually is, Terrence replied, composing his response to Tiffany. The visible discrimination is just the tip of the iceberg. There's always a culture beneath that supports it. As the car navigated through Queens toward Manhattan, a social media notification appeared on Terrence's phone. The hashtag SkyWest Racism was trending, with videos from multiple passengers showing his removal from first class. The court of public opinion was already in session, and the verdict didn't look favorable for SkyWest Airlines. The Waldorf Astoria's presidential suite buzzed with focused energy. What had begun as an executive team meeting had evolved into a war room operation, with various workstations set up around the spacious living area. Terrence Washington stood at the center, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he directed the rapidly unfolding strategy. Legal team, what's our position? He asked, turning to Sofia Ramirez, Phoenix Technologies' chief counsel, who had flown in on a private jet immediately after receiving Terrence's call. Sofia looked up from her laptop, her expression confident. Multiple angles of attack, all solid. First, as a 28% stakeholder in Diversified Holdings, which controls 67% of SkyWest, you have significant shareholder rights including the ability to call an emergency board meeting. Second, we have enough documentation of discriminatory practices to file an extremely credible civil rights lawsuit that would survive any motion to dismiss. Third, there's the consumer protection angle. They're systematically bumping passengers with confirmed reservations based on race, which violates DOT regulations. Terrence nodded. And the crew members who've come forward? Game changers, Sofia replied. Tiffany Carter has 2 years of documented incidents. The other 2 flight attendants, James Baker and Lucy Chen, have similar records. Most importantly, they have internal emails showing that complaints were received by management and deliberately buried. Across the room, Jordan Williams was debriefing Tiffany, James, and Lucy, recording their testimonies and cataloging their evidence. The three SkyWest employees looked simultaneously nervous and relieved, like people who had carried a heavy burden for too long. "They've been running their own internal investigation," Jordan called over. "Apparently, Thompson, Miller, and Reynolds have a group text where they openly discuss which passengers to reseat based on race." Lucy has screenshots. Alana Brooks, who had been coordinating with Phoenix's PR team, joined Terrence by the strategic planning whiteboard. Social media is exploding. The videos from the flight have over 5 million views combined. SkyWest stock is already down 3% in after-hours trading, and analysts are predicting a bigger drop tomorrow. What's their response so far? Terrence asked. Standard corporate apology. Investigating the incident doesn't reflect our values, blah blah blah. They've reached out to our PR department 6 times in the last hour, increasingly desperate to speak with you directly. Terrence smiled grimly. They'll have their chance. Just not on their terms. He turned to address the entire room. I want to be clear about our objectives here. This isn't about me or what happened to me personally. I could buy my own airline if I wanted to. This is about using our position and resources to create meaningful change. The room quieted as everyone focused on his words. What happened today happens to people without my resources every day. People who can't fight back, who don't have legal teams or ownership stakes or media influence. Today, this crew picked the wrong target, and we're going to make sure they, and every other airline, think twice before allowing discrimination to masquerade as customer service in the future. Nods of agreement around the room signaled unified purpose. So here's the plan, Terrence continued. First, we use our shareholder leverage to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow afternoon. Sophia, prepare the formal notice immediately. Already drafting it, Sophia confirmed. Second, we prepare a comprehensive report of all documented discrimination incidents involving this crew and airline. Jordan, work with our 3 witnesses to compile everything they have. We need it organized and unimpeachable. Jordan gave a thumbs up. Third, Alana, coordinate with PR on a strategic media response. Not yet, we let them stew overnight, but be ready to move when I give the word. On it, Alana replied. We've got Good Morning America, CNN, and MSNBC already reaching out for interviews. Decline for now, Terrence instructed. We control the narrative, not them. He looked at his watch, 10:30 p.m. Everyone get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense. I need you all sharp. We reconvene at 6 a.m. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Terrence stepped onto the suite's balcony, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. His phone buzzed with a text from the New York governor, who had apparently heard about the incident and wanted to express personal support. Political figures sensed a moment unfolding. Terrence put the phone away without responding. This wasn't about political points or personal vendettas. This was about justice and systemic change. He thought about his mother, how she'd taught him to stand up for what was right, but also to be strategic in his battles. Choose fights you can win, she'd said, and that are worth winning. This one was both. A knock at the balcony door interrupted his thoughts. It was Tiffany Carter, looking somewhat overwhelmed by the high-powered operation she now found herself part of. Mr. Washington. Do you have a moment? Of course, Tiffany. And please, call me Terrence. She stepped onto the balcony, clutching a tablet. I wanted to show you something that just came in from another flight attendant. It's a recording of Captain Thompson speaking to the crew before a flight last month. She pressed play on a video. Thompson's voice came through clearly. Remember, first class sets the tone for the whole flight. We need to maintain the right environment up front. Use your judgment about who belongs there and who doesn't. Some passengers may have the money for a first-class ticket, but that doesn't mean they fit the SkyWest image. Terrence's jaw tightened. This is explicit. There's more, Tiffany said. We've created a secure chat group for crew members who want to speak out. There are already 37 people who've joined, from all over the SkyWest network. This isn't just one crew or one route. It's throughout the airline. Terence took a deep breath, processing this information. Thank you, Tiffany. This is incredibly valuable. And thank you for your courage. I know the risks you're taking. She straightened her shoulders. It's worth it. I became a flight attendant because I love making people feel welcome and safe. What's happening at SkyWest is the opposite of that. After Tiffany left, Terence made one more call, to the chairman of the Phoenix Technologies board, Harold Jenkins. Harold, I need to postpone tomorrow's contract signing until the afternoon. Terence, this is a $4.2 billion deal. The federal procurement team has a tight schedule. I understand that. But something more important has come up. I'll handle it personally with them. Trust me on this. There was a pause on the line. This is about what happened on your flight, isn't it? It's all over the news. Yes. Then do what you need to do. The government can wait a few hours. Some things matter more than money. Thank you, Harold. Terence ended the call and looked out at the city once more. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but also the opportunity for meaningful change. He thought about all the people who had ever been humiliated, marginalized, or discriminated against without the power to fight back. Tomorrow, he would fight for all of them. As he turned to go back inside, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Walter Sterling, the man who had taken his seat. The subject line read, "A misunderstanding." Terence opened it, curious about what Sterling might have to say now that he knew who Terence was. Mr. Washington. It appears there was an unfortunate misunderstanding on today's flight. Had I known who you were, I certainly would have approached the situation differently. I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow to discuss potential synergies between our companies. I have significant government contacts that could benefit Phoenix Technologies. Regards. Walter Sterling. CEO, Sterling Properties. Terence stared at the email, incredulous at Sterling's assumption that his objection was to not being recognized as someone important, rather than to the discriminatory treatment itself. The message inadvertently revealed everything about Sterling's worldview, that respect should be allocated based on status, not inherent human dignity. He deleted the email without responding and rejoined his team. There was work to do. At precisely 2 p.m. the following day, Terence Washington strode through the revolving doors of SkyWest Airlines corporate headquarters in downtown Manhattan. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit that had been delivered to his hotel that morning, his posture radiating confidence and purpose. Behind him followed his entourage, Alana Brooks, Sophia Ramirez, Jordan Williams, and 2 junior attorneys carrying leather document portfolios. The security guard at the reception desk did a double-take as he recognized the approaching group. Mr. Washington, we've been expecting you. The board is assembled in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor. Thank you, Terence replied cordially, accepting the visitor badges. As they entered the elevator, Alana leaned in. The $4.2 billion contract. Signed an hour ago, Terence confirmed. The government procurement team was actually quite understanding. Apparently, several of them had seen the videos. The elevator ascended smoothly, and Terence used these final moments to center himself. What was about to happen wasn't just about one incident or even one airline, it was about setting a precedent that corporations couldn't ignore discrimination without facing serious consequences. The doors opened directly into an elegant reception area where a nervous-looking executive assistant stood waiting. Mr. Washington, I'm Jessica, Mr. Harding's assistant. Please follow me. She led them down a hallway lined with photographs of SkyWest aircraft and smiling, diverse passengers, an irony not lost on Terence. At the end of the hall stood imposing double doors, which Jessica opened to reveal a large conference room. Around a massive mahogany table sat 15 people, the SkyWest Airlines board of directors and executive leadership team. At the head of the table was CEO Richard Harding, a silver-haired man with a deep tan and an expression that attempted confidence but revealed anxiety in the tightness around his eyes. Mr. Washington, Harding stood, extending his hand. On behalf of the entire SkyWest family, I want to express our deepest apologies for your experience yesterday. I assure you, It does not reflect our values or standards. Terrence shook his hand briefly. Thank you for accommodating this emergency meeting, Mr. Harding. I believe we have important matters to discuss. The atmosphere in the room was tense as Terrence and his team took their seats at the opposite end of the table. Terrence noted the presence of Walter Sterling sitting among the board members, looking considerably less smug than he had on the airplane. Before we begin, Harding said, I want to inform you that we've taken immediate action. The crew members involved have been suspended pending investigation, and we've... Suspended? Terrence interrupted. That's interesting, because according to our information, this same crew has been the subject of at least 24 formal complaints for discriminatory behavior over the past 18 months. Each time, they were temporarily suspended and then quietly reinstated once media attention died down. Is that the action you're referring to? A palpable ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Several board members exchanged glances. I'm not aware of any previous, Harding began. Then you're either willfully ignorant or deliberately lying, neither of which reflects well on your leadership, Terrence cut in, his voice remaining calm despite the sharpness of his words. We have documented evidence of a systemic pattern of discrimination that extends far beyond yesterday's incident. Sophia opened her laptop and pressed a button that activated the room's presentation system. On the large screen appeared a meticulously organized timeline of discrimination complaints against SkyWest, with particular emphasis on the crew from Flight 1442. What you're looking at, Sophia explained professionally, is evidence we've gathered in just the past 18 hours. It includes sworn statements from SkyWest employees, passengers, and documentation from your own HR department that was deliberately buried. This is outrageous, sputtered an older board member. You can't come in here making accusations without. I'm not making accusations, Terrence clarified. I'm stating facts. Facts that, as a 28% stakeholder in your parent company, I have every right to present to this board. The revelation of his ownership stake silenced the room. Clearly, this information hadn't been shared with everyone present. Now, Terrence continued, I could file a discrimination lawsuit that would cost this airline millions in legal fees and settlements, not to mention the incalculable damage to your brand. But that's not why I'm here. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline before turning back to face the board. I'm here because discrimination is bad business. It's not just morally reprehensible, it's financially stupid. And since I own a significant portion of this airline, I have a vested interest in ensuring it operates both ethically and profitably. The double doors opened, and Jessica the assistant entered, looking flustered. I'm sorry for the interruption, Mr. Harding, but they insisted. Behind her came Shannon Miller, Captain Bradley Thompson, and First Officer Brian Reynolds, still in their SkyWest uniforms. They had clearly been summoned to headquarters, likely expecting a slap on the wrist as had happened before. The blood drained from their faces as they spotted Terrence sitting at the board table. Perfect timing, Terrence said. Please, join us. The three crew members hesitantly entered the room, standing awkwardly as there were no remaining seats at the table. Ms. Miller, Captain Thompson, Mr. Reynolds, Terrence acknowledged each of them. We were just discussing the pattern of discriminatory behavior that you three have engaged in over the past several years. Captain Thompson stepped forward, his demeanor shifting to defensive anger. Now wait just a minute. We followed standard procedure for determining which passengers belong in first class based on their race. Terrence finished for him. Is that the standard procedure you're referring to? Or perhaps you mean your practice of referring to first class as the white section among yourselves? Thompson's face reddened. That's a lie. Who told you that? In answer, Sophia played an audio recording on the presentation system. Thompson's voice filled the room. Keep the white section clean today, folks. We've got some VIPs on the manifest. Shannon Miller looked as though she might faint. Brian Reynolds stared at the floor. We have dozens of these recordings, Terrence informed them. Provided by your colleagues who are tired of covering for your behavior and risking their own careers in the process. He turned back to the board. This isn't about three rogue employees. This is about a corporate culture that has enabled and protected this behavior. The fact that Mr. Sterling sits on this board despite numerous complaints about his treatment of minority passengers speaks volumes. All eyes turned to Walter Sterling, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't have to listen to this," Sterling blustered, starting to rise. "Actually, you do," Terence countered. "Because in approximately 5 minutes, every major news outlet is going to receive a detailed report of SkyWest's discriminatory practices, including your personal involvement, Mr. Sterling. The only question is whether that report will include the actions this board took to address the problem, or whether it will note your continued denial and protection of the perpetrators." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled on everyone present. CEO Harding looked physically ill. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Washington?" asked the board's only black member, an older woman named Diane Jenkins who had been watching the proceedings with increasing distress. Terence nodded to Alana, who distributed documents to everyone at the table. "This is a comprehensive anti-discrimination plan for SkyWest Airlines. It includes mandatory training, transparent reporting of all passenger complaints, an independent review board for discrimination allegations, and significant policy changes to ensure this never happens again." He paused, letting them flip through the detailed proposal. "Additionally, I am calling for the immediate termination of the 3 crew members present, as well as any executives who knowingly buried discrimination complaints." "You can't do this," Thompson protested. "We have contracts, unions." "Your union has already been consulted," Jordan interjected. "They've reviewed the evidence and declined to defend clear violations of both company policy and federal law." Shannon Miller began to cry quietly. Reynolds looked resigned. "As for you, Mr. Sterling," Terence continued, "your company's government contracts are now under review following your documented pattern of discriminatory behavior. I've already spoken with the appropriate authorities this morning." Sterling's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive." "Careful," Terence warned. "Everything said in this room is being recorded." CEO Harding finally found his voice. "The board needs time to review this proposal and—" "You don't have time," Terence cut him off. "The press conference begins in 1 hour. Either I announce that SkyWest has taken decisive action against discrimination, including terminating those responsible, or I announce that I'm divesting my shares and filing the largest civil rights lawsuit in aviation history. Your choice." The board erupted in urgent whispers. Diane Jenkins raised her hand for silence. "I move that we accept Mr. Washington's proposal in full, effective immediately." "Second," said another board member quickly. Harding looked around the table, seeing the inevitable conclusion. "All in favor?" Hands went up around the table, all except Sterling's and 2 others. "Motion carries," Harding announced wearily. "Mr. Washington, SkyWest Airlines accepts your proposal." Terence nodded. "Excellent decision. Now, I believe there's something you need to say to these 3. He gestured toward the crew members. Harding stood, straightening his tie. "Captain Thompson, Ms. Miller, Mr. Reynolds, your employment with SkyWest Airlines is terminated, effective immediately. Please surrender your credentials to security on your way out." The 3 stood in shocked silence, the reality of consequences, real consequences, finally sinking in. "This isn't over," Thompson muttered as he turned to leave. "You're right about that," Terence agreed. "The FAA will be reviewing your pilot's license, and there may be criminal charges related to some of your actions. This is just the beginning." As the crew was escorted out, Terence turned back to the board. "Now, let's discuss the future of SkyWest Airlines. A future where every passenger is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background. Because that's not just the right thing to do, it's good business." The meeting continued for another hour, with detailed discussions of implementation timelines and accountability measures. When it concluded, Terence and his team exited the building to find a crowd of reporters waiting. The story had leaked, as Terence had known it would. Standing before the microphones, with SkyWest's headquarters as his backdrop, Terence Washington prepared to deliver a message that would reverberate throughout the airline industry and beyond. It wasn't just about one incident or one airline anymore. It was about changing the way America did business. Camera flashes illuminated Terrence Washington's face as he stood before the assembled press on the steps of SkyWest's corporate headquarters. Behind him stood not only his Phoenix Technologies team but also Diane Jenkins from the SkyWest board, Tiffany Carter, and several other SkyWest employees who had come forward with evidence of discrimination. "Good afternoon," Terrence began, his voice steady and clear. "Yesterday, I experienced something that millions of Americans face every day, discrimination based on the color of my skin. But unlike most people who face such treatment, I had the resources and position to do something about it." He paused, making eye contact with various reporters. "Today, I'm not here to announce a lawsuit or to call for boycotts. I'm here to announce the beginning of transformative change at SkyWest Airlines, change that I hope will serve as a model for the entire industry." Terrence outlined the comprehensive reforms that the SkyWest board had just approved: the establishment of a passenger dignity department headed by Tiffany Carter, mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, a transparent reporting system for discrimination complaints, and the termination of the crew members and executives who had perpetuated or covered up discriminatory practices. "This isn't just about punishment," he emphasized. "It's about progress. It's about recognizing that treating every human being with dignity and respect isn't just morally right, it's good business." As questions flew from reporters, Terrence handled each with thoughtful precision. When asked if he was satisfied with the outcome, his response was measured. "This is not about my satisfaction. It's about ensuring that the grandmother traveling to see her grandchildren, the student flying to college, the businessman going to a meeting, regardless of their race, gender, or background, can all expect to be treated with the same respect and dignity. That work is just beginning." A reporter from CNN pushed further, "Mr. Washington, some would say you're only getting this response because you're a billionaire CEO. What about regular people who face discrimination?" Terrence nodded solemnly. "That's precisely why I'm announcing the creation of the Dignity in Transit Foundation, funded with an initial $50 million from my personal holdings. This foundation will provide legal support to individuals facing discrimination in air travel, trains, buses, any form of public transportation. Because everyone deserves an advocate." The announcement sent a ripple through the crowd. This went beyond corporate reform, it was a systematic approach to a pervasive problem. As the press conference concluded, Diane Jenkins stepped forward to the microphones. "As the newly appointed chairperson of SkyWest's board, I want to emphasize our commitment to making these changes meaningful and lasting. We failed our passengers and our employees by allowing discrimination to persist. That ends today." Behind the scenes, the transformation had already begun. Walter Sterling had resigned from the board rather than face further scrutiny of his behavior. The federal procurement officer who had signed Phoenix Technologies' $4.2 billion contract that morning had already initiated a review of Sterling Properties government contracts, citing character and fitness concerns. 6 months later, Terrence Washington found himself again at O'Hare International Airport, preparing to board a SkyWest flight to Los Angeles. Much had changed in the intervening months. The airline industry had undergone a seismic shift. SkyWest's reforms had sparked a competitive race among airlines to demonstrate their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Industry publications had named SkyWest Most Improved Airline under its new leadership, with customer satisfaction scores rising dramatically. The Dignity in Transit Foundation had already taken on 63 cases, winning settlements for passengers who had faced discrimination. More importantly, the mere existence of the foundation had created a deterrent effect, making transportation companies more cautious about their treatment of all passengers. As Terrence approached the gate for his flight, he was greeted by a diverse team of gate agents and flight attendants, all wearing pins that read "Dignity for All" alongside their SkyWest badges. "Good afternoon, Mr. Washington," the lead flight attendant, a young black man named Derek Johnson, greeted him. "Welcome aboard. We're honored to have you flying with us today." The greeting was professional and genuine, the same one Terrence had observed being given to every passenger regardless of their appearance or status. As he settled into his first-class seat, Terrence noticed the changes throughout the cabin. Subtle but meaningful adjustments had been made to create a more inclusive environment, from the diverse range of magazines available to passengers to the selection of music playing during boarding. Tiffany Carter, now director of the Passenger Dignity Department, stopped by his seat. "Mr. Washington, it's good to see you again. We've implemented all the reforms ahead of schedule, and complaint rates are down 78% across the airline. And how are the employees responding?" Terrence asked, knowing that true change required buy-in at all levels. Tiffany smiled. There was resistance at first, especially from some of the old guard. But morale has actually improved. Turns out, most people want to work for a company they can be proud of. As the flight prepared for departure, Terrence looked out the window at the bustling airport operations. He thought about his mother, who had taught him to stand his ground but also to use his position to lift others. He thought about all the people who would never know how their travel experience had been improved because one person refused to accept discriminatory treatment. Captain Jessica Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard SkyWest Airlines Flight 1442 to Los Angeles. Our flight time today will be approximately 4 hours and 15 minutes. At SkyWest, we're committed to ensuring every passenger has a comfortable and dignified journey. We're glad you've chosen to fly with us today." Terrence closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. The incident 6 months ago had been painful and humiliating, but it had catalyzed change that would benefit countless travelers for years to come. It wasn't just about one seat on one flight. It was about creating a world where dignity wasn't a privilege for the powerful but a right for everyone. As the plane took off, rising above the clouds, Terrence Washington looked toward the horizon. There was still much work to be done in the fight against discrimination, but today marked meaningful progress. Sometimes, the most powerful response to injustice wasn't just personal vindication but systemic change that lifted everyone. This story teaches us that true power isn't just about wealth or position but how we use our influence to create positive change. Terrence Washington could have simply accepted the airline's apology and compensation, but he recognized an opportunity to address systemic discrimination that affects countless others without his resources or platform. The incident highlights how racism often operates, not always through explicit slurs or violence, but through subtle behaviors, coded language, and standard procedures that disadvantage people of color. These everyday indignities may seem small to observers but accumulate into significant barriers and trauma. We also learn the importance of documentation and solidarity. Without the evidence collected by Tiffany and other employees, the pattern of discrimination might have been dismissed as an isolated incident. When people with conscience work together, they can expose injustice and drive meaningful reform. Perhaps most importantly, the story reminds us that fighting discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business. Companies that truly value diversity and dignity create better experiences for everyone, ultimately improving their reputation and bottom line. Change often requires both pressure from outside and transformation from within. By using his unique position to create both, Terrence ensured that his individual experience became a catalyst for widespread improvement. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination on your next flight? Would you speak up or stay silent? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can all contribute to creating more respectful environments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps us continue bringing important stories like this one to light. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, in the fight against discrimination, every voice and action matters.